I want to start today with a scenario that I think everyone, and I mean literally everyone, has found themselves in at some point.
Oh, for sure.
You're at a coffee shop or maybe you're just walking down a really busy city street and you see someone in need. Maybe it's a busker or maybe someone is just short on change at the register.
Right. Yeah.
And you step in, you drop the $20 bill, or you swipe your card, you do the quote unquote good deed, and then you walk away.
You get that afterglow.
Exactly, the warm fuzzies. But then, almost immediately, something else creeps in. You pull out your phone, you see the text thread with your partner, or maybe you open up X or whatever, and you have this burning, almost physical itch to just type out what just happened.
Oh, I know that itch.
Not to brag. Never to brag, just to, share
Yeah.
something like, saw a guy struggling today, really puts things in perspective.
Ah, yes, the classic humble share.
Right. But here is the kicker. If you don't send that text, if you don't make that post, does the experience feel somehow less real? Like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one likes the status update, did the tree actually fall?
You've hit on something so incredibly fundamental there, because we live in an attention economy now, right? We are essentially trained from birth to document our existence.
They really are.
But the text we are diving into today, which is titled The Virtue of Silent Charity, takes that entire modern impulse and absolutely shreds it.
Sure shreds it.
It does. It suggests that that itch to share isn't just annoying or a little vain, it's actually destructive. It argues that the very moment you look for an audience, you bankrupt the act itself.
Wow, bankrupt. That is a really strong word.
It is a strong word, but as we get into the source material today, you will see it's actually a text about economics. Spiritual economics, sure, but economics nonetheless. It's all about transactions, receipts, and where exactly you choose to cash your checks.
Okay, so let's set the stage for this deep dive. Our mission today is to really unpack this text's super strict dichotomy between performing righteousness and practicing it authentically. And the source material here is so fascinating because it's an ancient text, but honestly, it reads like a direct critique of modern influencer culture.
Yeah, the parallels are pretty striking.
It's this short, dense philosophical argument, and frankly, it is kind of terrifying. It sets a standard that feels almost impossible to meet.
It is entirely uncompromising. Look, most ethical frameworks just tell you what to do. They say, give to the poor, help your neighbor, be a good person.
Right, the basics.
This text assumes you are already doing that. It doesn't actually care about the what. It is entirely obsessed with the how and the why.
Okay, so let's get into the theatrics of it all because I love the imagery here. We're going to look at the warning, the so-called hypocrites, what reward really means, and then this radical instruction for secrecy. The text opens with a warning that literally sets the stage. It says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them.
Right? To be seen by them. That is the operating phrase of the entire piece. In the original Greek of this text, the word used for to be seen is actually related to theatron.
Oh, like theater.
Exactly, theater. So the text is accusing these people of basically staging a play.
So righteousness isn't the act itself in this context. It's essentially a script.
Yes. If you're doing it to be seen, you aren't actually a philanthropist. You are an actor. And the text is absolutely brutal about the consequences of that. It says, if you turn your charity into performance art, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven.
See, this is where I struggle with the text a little bit. It feels so extremely binary. It's an all or nothing proposition. Like, surely if I help a starving person, but I also happen to tell my friend about it, the person is still fed, right? The utility of the act is still there.
Right.
Does the text really care that much about my internal psychological state?
Well, what you're describing is the modern utilitarian argument. The idea that the outcome justifies the method. Like if the hospital gets built, who really cares if the billionaire donor demands his name in giant letters on the building?
Right. The sick people are still getting treated.
Exactly. Yeah. But this source isn't interested in utility. Not at all. It is interested in the soul or the core character of the giver. It argues that you simply cannot have two audiences. You can perform for the crowd, or you can perform for the Father, which is the divine observer in this text, but you cannot double dip.
You can't get paid twice for the exact same job.
Precisely. And that leads us directly to the villains of this story.
Hmm.
The text introduces these characters it calls the hypocrites.
Oh, the imagery here is just wild. It says, so when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets. Now, I know we probably shouldn't take this too literally, but the mental image of someone just blasting a trumpet before dropping a coin in a cup is hilarious to me.
It does sound absurd to us now, but think about the actual function of a trumpet in that era. It cuts through all the noise. It demands immediate attention. It basically says, look over here. Something very important is happening.
Oh, so it's the ancient notification sound.
It is. It is the push notification. It is the going live alert. Whether it was an actual literal trumpet or just a vivid metaphor for making a huge fuss, the mechanism is exactly the same. Notice they do this in the synagogues and streets. Those are the places with the highest foot traffic.
They want maximum visibility. They want to go viral.
They do. And the text is explicitly clear about their motivation. It says they do this to be honored by others. They want the clout.
They want the likes.
Yes. And this is where we get to that core economic argument I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Because this next sentence is the one that stops me in my tracks every single time I read it. The text says, truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full.
Received their reward in full. It literally sounds like a receipt being printed out at a cash register.
That is exactly what it is. It's a receipt. Think about the nature of the transaction here. The hypocrite wants human honor. They blow the trumpet. People look. People applaud. Maybe someone says, wow, what a generous person.
Transaction complete.
Transaction complete. The hypocrite desperately wanted attention, and they effectively bought it with their charity.
So the text is just saying, hey, you got what you paid for.
Yes. And because you got what you paid for, which is the applause, you absolutely cannot expect anything else. The account is settled. There is no spiritual credit rolling over to the next life. You cashed out.
That is actually a really dark way to look at it when you think about it. It implies that the applause isn't just a nice little bonus. The applause is the actual price you pay for losing the spiritual reward.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. The applause is the cost. If you let yourself be honored by others, you are effectively spending the spiritual value of that good deed. You are converting it into social currency.
And social currency suffers from massive inflation. I mean, it's essentially worthless almost as soon as you get it.
Yeah, completely. It's fleeting.
It reminds me of corporate charity. You know, when a giant corporation spends, say, $1 million on an environmental project, but then they spend $5 million on a massive advertising campaign to tell everyone they did the project. We all intuitively know that feels kind of icky.
It feels incredibly transactional. We all know they aren't doing it purely for the cause. They are buying public goodwill.
Yeah.
This text is just applying that exact same cynicism to our own personal, private lives. It asks you directly, are you buying goodwill with your friends? Are you buying a reputation as a quote-unquote good person? Because if so, enjoy the reputation. That is all you get.
Okay, so if the trumpet method is the wrong way and apparently a massive waste of spiritual capital, what is the alternative? Because the source text gets really weird right here. It pivots directly to the listener and gives a very specific instruction.
Right, the shift to the second person. But when you give...
It says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing.
Ah, the famous left hand, right hand paradox.
I have to be completely honest here. This metaphor has always baffled me. I mean, not physically, obviously. I know my hands don't have separate brains. But psychologically, how on earth do you actually execute this?
It's a tall order.
It feels like the text is asking for a level of dissociation that is just impossible. If I am making a conscious decision to give someone money, my brain inherently knows I am doing it. I can't just hide the data from my own consciousness.
You're right. It is a deep psychological paradox.
Yeah.
It's like if you try really hard not to think about a pink elephant, what are you thinking about?
A pink elephant.
Exactly.
Mhm.
If you actively try to be unaware of your own generosity, you just become hyper-aware of your attempt to be unaware.
Right, you're just thinking, wow, look at me, I am being so incredibly humble right now. It's a total trap.
It is a trap. But I think that is exactly why the metaphor has to be so extreme. It is describing a state of flow. Think about a physical reflex. If you see a toddler falling off a chair, you lunge and catch them. You don't pause and think, I am now going to perform a heroic act. You just act.
Your left hand moves before your right hand, or your brain can even process the narrative.
Exactly. It is about unself-consciousness. The text is arguing for a kind of charity that is so second nature, so deeply embedded in your actual character, that it doesn't even require an internal monologue. It is about completely avoiding that pregame show and the postgame analysis in your own head.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's the internal applause that's really the problem. It's not just about hiding your good deeds from your nosy neighbors. The text seems to imply that the much bigger danger is my own ego giving me a standing ovation.
That is the far more dangerous audience, the audience in the mirror.
Yeah.
We crave validation so deeply that if we can't get it from the street corner, we will happily settle for getting it from ourselves. That little voice saying, I'm such a good person, the text says, stop that. Don't even let the left hand know. Just do the work and vanish.
Just do the work and vanish. I love that. And that leads us perfectly to the ultimate purpose of all this intense secrecy. The text says all of this is so that your giving may be in secret. And then it introduces the other party in this transaction, the one who isn't the crowd.
Yes. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you.
Who sees what is done in secret. That is a really heavy concept. It brings up the idea of the panopticon, the all-seeing eye. But usually in literature or philosophy, that concept is used to scare people. Big Brother is watching you. Here, though, it's presented as a profound comfort.
It totally flips the script on the concept of visibility. The hypocrite we talked about earlier, visibility means being seen by other people.
Yeah.
If people don't see it, it basically didn't happen.
Right.
But to this text, true visibility is divine attention.
Yeah.
And the radical argument is that the divine doesn't actually look at the stage. The divine looks backstage.
It's an audience of one.
Exactly, an audience of one. And that fundamentally changes the very nature of the performance. If you are performing for a massive crowd, you have to be loud. You have to buy the trumpet.
Yeah.
You have to make absolutely sure the people in the back row can see what you're doing.
You have to project.
Yes. But if you are performing for an audience that is standing right next to you, looking directly at your heart, you can whisper. You can be entirely invisible to everyone else on earth, and the message still gets through perfectly.
That's beautiful, but let me play devil's advocate for just a second here, because this demands a massive amount of faith from the person doing the giving. The hypocrite, for all their obvious faults, gets a guaranteed immediate return on investment. They blow the trumpet, heads turn. It is immediate, verifiable feedback.
It's tangible.
Exactly. But the secret giver gets silence. They drop the money, they walk away, and nothing happens. No one claps. The sky doesn't open up.
That is the absolute risk of this philosophy. The text is asking you to trade a very tangible asset, which is social approval, for a purely theoretical one, which is divine reward. From a purely rational, secular economic perspective, that is a terrible trade. You are giving away your resources and getting zero recognition in return.
You are operating entirely in the dark.
You are. But that is exactly why the text calls it righteousness and not just public relations. It requires a deep belief that the secret reality is actually more real than the public reality. It requires trusting that the Father who sees in secret is actually paying attention.
And the text makes a very firm promise that this figure will reward you. It doesn't say might reward you or could reward you, it says will, but it is pretty vague about the what. What exactly is the reward? We know the hypocrites get public honor. What do the secret givers actually get?
The source text leaves that completely open, and I think that is highly intentional. It could be a sense of deep spiritual well-being. It could refer to a future heavenly inheritance, depending on your theological view. Or, if we just look at it psychologically, it could be the freedom from that exact addiction to approval we talked about at the very beginning of the show.
Oh, that is really interesting. So the reward is that you simply stop needing the trumpet.
In a way, yes. If you can actually learn to be truly satisfied with the audience of one, you become immune to the demands of the crowd. You don't desperately need the likes anymore. You don't need the external validation. You become self-possessed in a way that the hypocrite never ever can be, simply because the hypocrite is always going to be a slave to the audience's reaction.
That is a remarkably powerful idea. The secrecy itself builds a kind of inner fortress.
But we should be clear, it is incredibly hard. We really shouldn't pretend it isn't. We are social animals at our core. We are biologically wired to signal our value to the tribe. Look, I found food, or look, I helped the weak. This text is essentially asking us to fight millions of years of evolutionary programming.
It really is countercultural. Especially right now. I mean, think about how we all function online today. If you engage in activism, if you donate to a vital cause, the default setting is to create a digital paper trail. We literally have verified badges and specific colored ribbons for doing good things.
And look, there's certainly a nuance there that we have to acknowledge. Sometimes public charity genuinely inspires others to act. The text doesn't say never let anyone ever see you do a good deed. In fact, in other parts of this exact same historical tradition, it says to let your light shine before others. But the crucial distinction here is intent.
The why.
The why. Are you letting your light shine so people can see the light itself? Or are you shining it so people can see you holding the flashlight?
Oof. That is the distinction right there. Look at the beautiful light versus look at me holding this beautiful light.
Exactly. And the text we are reading today strongly suggests that purity of intent is incredibly fragile. The very second you introduce an audience, the chemistry changes entirely. The ego wakes up, the left hand starts shaking the right hand.
So if we take this text seriously, it puts us all in a bit of a bind because even if we don't literally go out and buy a brass trumpet, we all have our own little trumpet.
We do.
The humble brag on a podcast.
Yeah.
The story told at a dinner party that just happens to make us look super generous. The subtle resume padding.
The virtue signaling.
Right, the virtue signaling. And the text is saying to us, hey, you got your reward. That little nod of approval from your boss, that's it. That is the whole payout.
And once you spend it, it is gone forever.
This brings me to a thought that has honestly been nagging me since I first read the source material to prep for today. We usually think of seeking validation as just kind of a mild character weakness. We say, oh, he's just a little insecure, he needs some compliments.
Sure, we dismiss it.
But if we follow the cold, hard logic of this text to its conclusion, are we actually robbing ourselves?
That is the deeply provocative question here.
Like, imagine you have a winning lottery ticket. That is your good bead. You can cash it in for $1 million with the father in secret, but instead you just show it to a random guy on the street so he'll say, wow, cool ticket, man. And in that exact moment, the ticket dissolves. You traded $1 million for a single wow.
That is exactly the economic model this text presents. It strongly suggests we are constantly, actively selling our spiritual inheritance for absolute pennies. We are consistently settling for the incredibly cheap, immediate payout of human attention, rather than just waiting for the compound interest of the secret reward.
Man, it really makes you look at your own life differently. It makes you wonder how many massive rewards you've accidentally burned just because you couldn't keep your own mouth shut.
It certainly invites a very rigorous inventory of our own motives. It challenges every one of us to ask, can I bear the weight of a secret? Can I do something truly good and just let it die with me? Or am I so hollow inside that I constantly need other people to fill me up with praise?
Can I bear the weight of a secret? That is a haunting question. It suggests that true secrecy actually requires immense strength. The hypocrite is fundamentally weak because they leak everything. The righteous person, on the other hand, is a vault.
A vault. I really like that framing. A place where immense value is stored securely, not just spent frivolously on the street.
So for you listening today, and honestly for myself as well, the challenge is pretty clear. Next time you do something good, whether it is a massive donation or just a tiny favor, try the left-hand challenge.
Don't post it. Don't text your partner about it. Don't even dwell on it in the shower later thinking about how incredibly great you are.
Just do it. Delete the mental file and see what happens. See if you can actually handle the silence.
You might just find that the silence is actually where the real value lives.
And on that note, we are going to leave you with your own thoughts to mull over. Absolutely no trumpets from us today.
Not at all.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We will see you next time.